I graduated high school in June of '64. Went to a year of college up at Young Harris College up in North Georgia, almost to the North Carolina or Tennessee state line. And they wanted me to either come to summer school or lay out of fall quarter. And came back home and made a decision. And well, I don't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years in high school. I took a course in mechanical drawing or drafting. So I went out to Clarkston, what at the time was called DeKalb Technical, and got enrolled in a drafting / mechanical drawing class. And so this was fall of '65, September of '65. And of course everybody was scared shitless about getting drafted to go to Vietnam or wherever. And one day the phone rang, and it's my cousin who's, if I was born at 10 o'clock on Sunday night, he was born about 2 o'clock on Tuesday morning. My mother and his mother were sisters. And he says, have I got a deal for us? Reserve unit down on the Georgia Tech campus. Went down there and signed on the dotted line. I think like 10 months to finish whatever school we were in. And I went to, they called it drill, but it was reserve meetings, one night a week, and I think it was on Wednesdays, down on the Tech campus. And had all these classes and learned all this stuff. And it's all in this report I'm gonna give you typed out. August '66, if I'm not mistaken, but it's on here. First time I'd ever flown in an airplane. Flew to Chicago. And they picked us up at O'Hare, Great Lakes, Illinois training camp. 2 weeks. Because boot camp back then, and probably still is now, was 9 weeks. But because I had been going to drills and learning all this stuff, didn't have to do it at boot camp. But Chicago or Great Lakes in August is hot. Is hot. And so they get us up like at 4 o'clock in the morning to go out and drill on the parade ground when it wasn't so hot, and then do everything else we had to do. But then when I graduated boot camp, flew back to Atlanta, and I think I got to spend one night at home, and a friend and I got on a Greyhound bus and went to Charleston for shipboard training, and got put on probably, I don't know, maybe late World War II or Korean era destroyer, and I could go look her up on the computer and tell you everything you needed to know. Tied up to the pier in Charleston, and they said, okay, we got something to do. We sailed up the coast and went up the Potomac River. You ever heard of the Hole in the Water? The Potomac Bridge Tunnel. It's where interstate whatever it is goes up the East Coast, and it goes the highway goes out so far, and then it goes down into a tunnel and goes under the river, and then comes back up. We tied up at the old Anacostia Gun Factory in downtown Washington, D.C., and did public tours of the ship for 4 or 5 days. And when they're getting ready to come back home, they're listening to the weather forecast. There's a hurricane coming up the East Coast. And we don't want to be out there with a shipload of reservists coming right up the coast and us coming back down to Charleston. They held us over in D.C., and I guess it was Saturday morning, put us on a Navy school bus, or that's the equivalent of it, and took us out to Dulles. And we sat out there all day. Here comes a Pan Am from either London or Paris into Dulles. Everybody gets off that was getting off. The Pan Am crew gets off. A Delta crew gets on, and we get on, and we fly back to Atlanta. And rather than 2 days worth of sailing down the East Coast, 2 or 3 days sailing down the East Coast, and then still having to ride the Greyhound bus from Charleston back to Atlanta. And then, and I'd have to look at my date, but probably sometime in '67, got called up to active duty. I went up to Bainbridge, Maryland, to a school to learn how to be a postal clerk, and that was my primary job. Although I did, like I say, there were times when I had to go stand with that, or sit or mull around with that lifeboat crew, but that was only on the days that they were launching and recovering. And then some other times, because of the job I did, I belonged to a division of people on the ship called Operations Communications. And it rotated around, but I would call standing a watch, even though I was sitting down in the radio room, where there's all 2 or 3 different radio frequencies and people are talking here and there, with a set of headphones on. Because every hour on the hour, the lead ship in each group, and in our group it would have been the aircraft carrier, or however many other 4 or 5 groups of, 3, 4, 5 ships in a battle group. But every hour on the hour, that ship had to broadcast out over a certain channel in code, and the code changed at midnight every night. So I had a code book. Had to make sure you were on the right page in the code book, and with a set of earphones on. And as they read it out, you wrote it down in code. And then when everybody got finished, then you got your code book out and decoded it. And it was the name of the ship or the name of the battle group, and then it was in latitude and longitude. And I'm sitting on the back side of a big clear plexiglass, and on the other side is the map. It's done in either tape or in white paint or whatever. And everybody there, I know it wasn't magnetic because it was plexiglass, but somehow or another they could stick the main ship in every battle group. And so or either I didn't, no, you didn't do it. But no, once I decoded it, then I erased where they were and moved them over. But because I'm on the back side of the board, I'm having to write backwards the name of that ship or the name of that battle group. And that was a 4-hour watch. Most afternoons before I went to bed, or right after dinner before I went to bed, I would make sure that I had made up or gone and checked my 2 drop boxes and got all the outgoing letters and got everything ready. But then if I stood a watch up there from midnight to 4 o'clock, called the mid, and of course you technically get off at 4:45 or 4:10. Before I could go to bed, I had to go down on the mess decks. I had a mailbox down there and get all the outgoing letters, and then go back to my post office where I had another drop box and get all the letters and turn them all in the same directions and sort them out by state and tie them up in nice, neat little bundles, put them in a mail bag, nylon mail bag, and take them up on the helicopter deck. Then I could go to bed. So this, what's this? 4:30, 4:45 maybe in the morning. Well, somewhere, maybe after midnight, a plane comes out from there was a naval air base at Subic Bay, Philippines, and they would fly the incoming mail out to the aircraft carrier that we were in the group with. And after daylight, they would load up the mail and come over and put it on a winch and lower it down on, we had 2 drone helicopters, but we had a little, probably, it was bigger than this living room, it mattered in floor space. And as soon as they're there, here's 2 or 3 of these guys down there at my bunk. Bolton, the mail's here, get up. So I got up and went and sorted it out. And you had, just like any other post office, had a box here for each division, and one of their guys would come by and pick it up. Now, I told you about doing aircraft carrier support. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that we did at night, everybody knew it as H&I, harassment and interdiction. On the ship we had 3 gun mounts, 5-inch diameter projectiles, and it varied from night to night, but about 5:30 or 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, the Marines or the Army or whoever, wherever they were on the shore, would radio us a map grid of a suspected Viet Cong concentration, or where they were hiding in the woods waiting to attack this village, or that they had already gotten into this village and were pretty much running it. They would radio us the map grid, and my guys in what was known as Combat Information Center, they would lay out a map on a table and draw it off into a big square and divide it up into a grid of 60 squares. And then this started, it varied, but this was in the spring and early summer, because we were back to Charleston by July 4th. So late summer, spring, and late spring. But they would lay out that grid, and we would start let's say 8 o'clock, and they would fire 1 round a minute into each of those 60 squares in that grid, and then maybe wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes. Then they would fire a 10-round burst. So you wouldn't get all 60 squares, but it was way up here and way down here and there and all these, never in the same place twice. And then they'd wait another hour. So then maybe 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock, they'd go back to 1 round a minute. And every time the gun fired, it spit that powder casing out, and there was on each side there was a square hole in the floor. There was a trap door that closed it off, and it would spit it out, and the guys inside, they just kicked the shell casings out on the deck. But we didn't do what was called policing brass until daylight the next morning. And we're a half a mile off the beach, doing about 5 knots. And even in the calmest of water, that ship's gonna do this, even if it's just 2 or 3 inches, either way. So what keeps you awake at night? Brass going dingly, 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 all night long. One day, I don't remember where we were, but again, because they were always doing this anti-submarine warfare stuff, they roll one of these helicopters out onto the deck, and it's got 2 torpedoes slung up under it, and they fire it up, and with the radar tell it to go up. Somebody, I don't know if the guy had a joystick or whatever, but he was making that little helicopter fly. And they did this and they did that and they did this, and they told it to go up. And it went up and it went up, and they told it to stop going up, and it just kept going up. Last time we ever saw that helicopter. And one day we're just chugging along, and here's, a 40 or a 45-foot container, a truck but no wheels under it. First time I pretty much knew about containerized freight. Floating like this, and the doors are open. But it had taken on enough water that had got in it, and it was floating like this. So unless it really bobbed, it wasn't going to take on any more water. And they got on the radio, and whoever was on said, "What do you want us to do with this thing?" Blow it out of the water. So they called battle stations for one of the gun mounts. Locked on that thing with a radar, and the radar is telling the gun barrel what to do. It's all interconnected. And again, we're shooting 5-inch shells. First shell missed the damn thing. Second shell missed the damn thing. And the doors are open. Chief gunner's mate, who, had probably been in 17, 18, 20-year veterans, got in the gun mount, put a 5-inch round through the open doors of that container. Boom! bloop, bloop, sank it.